Yo! It's time to work on the Civic. I've been waiting half the winter for this. Finally got my cylinder head back. I told him to take his time. I told him I had all winter, so... Apparently he said one little spot on my cylinder head was like 3/1000ths of an inch off. Just one little spot somewhere, so he resurfaced it again. Drilled everything out to 1/2 inch. Looks really nice and square. And I told him too I'd have to drill this out, so I gave him some drill bits for it, and he just took a die grinder and he just die grinded out the inside a little more until it goes all the way down to the oil galley to make sure that I got a good amount of oil pressure in here. If you can see that, it's not quite round anymore. So that should get a good amount of oil going down into the cylinder head because it runs through this bolt hole. I had to go buy this, a 1/2 inch drill bit, because he didn't have one long enough, so I just went to the hardware store and got one. One other thing he did too, which was really nice of him, is this is the plug for the oil galley in the head, and he just welded on it, and he put a vice grip on it and a slide hammer and pulled this ball bearing out. And then he drilled it and tapped it and put an 1/8 inch pipe tap on here so he could clean the oil galleys really good. Make sure it was all really clean. So that was nice of him. I just got to let this thing thaw out now. It's really cold in here. I got to let the garage warm up because I can't be doing any cylinder head torquing. This thing's really cold. My garage is cold. I gotta let everything warm up really good before I put this on, because any torquing of the cylinder head can be wrong if none of this is room temperature. I'm going to let all this stuff just warm up. Give it an hour or so, and I can put it all on. Yeah, 1/2 inch is just right. I drilled out this head gasket to 1/2 inch too with a step drill. Looks like everything's going to line up fine enough. I'm not going to use this head gasket either. This is some cheapy eBay crap. I just broke that out just to see if my step drills would work. And they seem to work just fine. This one goes up to 12 millimeter. Then I got another one here that goes up to 1/2 inch. You can get this one at a hardware store. I actually had to mail order this metric one. In about October of last year, I was looking for a Ej8 Pro Seal head gasket, and everybody had them out of stock. And then I found this on eBay, and it was listed as Ej8 Pro Seal, and it says Pro Seal on it, but it's not J-E, but it's got the right part number on it. I'm like, well, what the heck is going on here? And I've been wondering who manufactures Ej8 Pro Seal head gaskets. They make it sound like it's them, and of course, they're not going to tell you. So I took this gasket out of the package, and this number was over this sticker, and it says made in Italy. I just Googled this number, and it came up with an Athena head gasket. So Athena makes Pro Seal head gaskets. So if you need a Pro Seal head gasket and you can't find one, you can just order one from Athena. So I'm going to try to drill this one out without destroying it. I better put some gloves on too. I don't want any oils from my hands on this material on the gasket, because that ain't good. I was thinking about drilling this out in 1/2 inch, but I think I'm just going to lay it on the head gasket, make sure these studs go through this, and with the 12 millimeter step drill, because it's just a hair bigger than the studs. And if I don't have any problems, I'm not going to step it up to 1/2 inch. Yeah, it looks like this 12 millimeter step drill is going to be just fine. I don't need to step it up to 1/2 inch. They go right down in there. So I'm just going to clean this gasket really good now, get all the metal shavings out of it, and make sure it's super clean. Give this one last touch with the brake cleaner. Make sure nothing comes off on my rag. I got a little bit of rust that came up because this thing was sitting outside all winter long. But it's going to be okay. Still flat as a pancake. I just got a little bit of corrosion around the firing ring here. You can barely see it. It's still super flat. This Athena head gasket too, it matches up with my cylinders almost perfect. The Ej8 Pro Seal head gasket that I got, it was, the bore was just a little larger on it. Wow, nice. I bought a couple of new temperature sending units for the thing, just because I can. One's an NTK and the other one's some generic Beck Arnoley stuff. Little silicone paste on this O-ring. 19 millimeter. This is going to get some PTFE. I want to make damn sure that this car is not detonating when I'm open lapping it. You never know, after I do a 20-minute run at wide open throttle, this thing might be getting hot enough to where it's detonating a little bit and lifting my head and blowing my head gasket. So I've been doing a bunch of research on it, and a lot of people are using these knock links to try to find detonation. And apparently the tuners use it, and every time they use knock ears, and these are in a car, they say if they hear a knock, this light comes on. So they're swearing by it. They say these are really accurate. So I'm going to throw in a knock link on this just to make sure this thing isn't detonating. If it ever does, I'll get a big red light on here and I'll be able to see it. And then I'll know that I'll have a tuning problem. It's better safe than sorry. I don't know. It's like, I think I paid like $230 for this or something. It came with shielded wiring and a knock sensor. I have a knock sensor in my car, and I probably could have used the wiring that was in it because the wiring that's in it is shielded too, but this is kind of like a standalone thing, and I figured it'd be a good idea just to get what they have and what they recommend. So I got a knock sensor here. This is actually like a European style Bosch knock sensor. And it's got a really nice shielded cable that I can put in the cabin of the car and wire all this up with. Fortunately, this is a D16y8 block, so it has a knock sensor in it. I actually bought this and put it in, and it's not used for anything. I have a D16y8. This is a stock Y8 car. So a Y8 and a Y5 actually has the knock sensor hole for it, and the Y7s do not. So luckily enough, I don't have to do any screwing around trying to figure out where to put this knock sensor. A lot of the tuners put the knock sensor down on the bottom of the block, and that's really not a good place to put one of these things. They use a bracket hole for this intake manifold. So this is actually the right place for it. And if you actually had a Y7 engine and it's out of the car, you can drill it and tap this hole to make one of these work. I'm just going to leave this wire just sit open. Try to get this thing out of here. Yeah, when I put this in, I actually thought that I could buy a computer that would support a knock sensor, but I guess that's not even a thing with tuners. It doesn't work right or something. So I just got to find a bolt with this thread. Then I can bolt that knock sensor right there. I got a slight problem here. It don't fit. This is 12-125, and this is 8-125. This is an 8 millimeter hole, and I got to step it up to 12 millimeters. Hopefully I don't wreck this sensor. These aren't cheap. I just lightly clamped it in my vise, and I used a rubber hose around it. Try not to damage it. Since I have a 12 millimeter step drill that I used on my head gasket, I might as well try to start it with that. Geez, I hope this is gonna work for me. Well, there it is. I got it. Looks like it's going to crush the top of this plastic because there's nothing left of it up there. You can see that. There's nothing left of it. There's no metal. So I'm going to file this down because all this plastic's just going to get crushed. Yeah, these are expensive too. I hope I didn't wreck it. Well, I had to file a little bit of the top off until I could get down to the brass, and there really isn't very much left at all on it. I found a bolt for it and bolted it down. Apparently there's a reducer stud you can buy for these that goes from 12.125 down to 8.125, and then you put the stud in here and just bolt it down, and drilling it out really wasn't a good idea. There was a little plastic ring halfway around the inside, so I got a very little bit of brass material left on the inside of this. Basically, these are piezoelectric sensors. It kind of works like a click lighter. You know, there's a couple crystals that touch, and when they touch, they make voltage. I'm pretty sure this is piezoelectric, and I wanted to make sure it worked. So I just took in, I got a graphing meter here. It's on a DC volt scale, and basically I just set it up for a Mercedes-Benz. That way I don't have to just do manual settings. I just did it by car. And then the white's the ground, and the red's the power. So what I'm going to do is just knock on the head right here, and it should produce voltage. And I know my knock sensor's working, so I don't have any fears about bolting this thing up and have it not work. I think I'm going to put all the cams and stuff on this after it's already in the car. I'll put this head on first. Might be a little easier for me this way. It's a little lighter anyways. This is an old box of 2.6 Mitsubishi head studs. It's got the old lubricant in it. I talked to ARP. They said I can go by the torque that's in the box, or I can use the new style ARP lube and then just go more than the torque that they have here. I already have an open package of the new Ultra Torque stuff, so I'm going to use that, I guess. Got all these tight. I'm just going to back them off just a little bit. Just to make sure there's no stresses on the bottom of the bolt. I'm going to put lubricant on the tops and the bottoms of all of these washers, just to make sure they don't bind up. These washers aren't quite fitting. So I got to grind down on the outside diameter, all of these washers. These washers have pretty rough edges, so I just bolted them all together. I found a 12mm bolt and just ground them down until almost all of the roughness of the material was gone. So that should work. Try all of this one more time. Yep, they all fit now. All these bolts are just a hair skinnier than the washers too, so I already know these are going to work. I'm down with the 12.14 millimeters. Okay, I got those snugged down a little. Now I can start with a torque sequence. This is where things get a little interesting, because a factory torque on these is like 50 foot-pounds. And then the ARP studs, I think, go up to 65 foot-pounds. But now that I got half-inch studs, it's going to be 90 foot-pounds. So I'm just going to do the regular factory torque sequence and then eventually bump it up to 90 pounds. I'm going to start at like 14 or 15 foot-pounds. I'm just going to go in the center and work my way out in a crisscross pattern. I'm going to double check them. The center one's actually loosened up. And then I'll go up to 36. Final torque on a D16 is 49 foot-pounds. Seems pretty good. I don't hear any bolt creak. If you hear any bolts creaking and squeaking. You got to take everything off and lubricate the nuts and the washers and everything. They're all going on pretty smooth though. Now I'm all done with the factory 49 foot-pounds, so I'll just, I don't know, bump this up to 70. Right now that's tighter than the ARP bolts that are made for this car. Now I'm going to do my final 90 foot-pounds. The socket's getting a little short, so I'm going to drop it down on the stud and then torque it. Holy crap. That's going to be tight. And there it is. I got 12mm studs in my D16y8. Now I can just finish assembling this bad boy. I got this wonderful piece of factory exhaust manifold I will be reusing. I drilled and tapped 4 of these bolts when I built this for 10mm because this is a cheap Chinese eBay manifold. And the holes were huge, so I used the stock bolts or the stock studs in here, and the manifold was walking all over the place. And now it's really tight and square, and I don't want to put the factory studs back in here. I had what, 5 other studs, and I don't want to put those in, so I bought some 5.3 liter GM exhaust bolts. These are the ones for GMs that break all the time. I'm going to use these instead of studs because those studs I took out, they were a pain in the butt to deal with. Hopefully these won't be too long. I think they're going to be okay. If they're too long, I'll cut them down a little bit. It's no big deal. Yeah, it looks like all of these bolts are going to be a little too long. I got to cut these down. I cut these bolts down a little bit. They seem to go in really nice. These have 12mm heads on them too, even though they're GM. It's kind of cool because it's the same as a Honda. I'm going to bolt the intake manifold back on next. I'm going to have to use this adorable thing again. I really like these. They're reusable. Now this is the fun one that nobody likes to drop. Now there's a trick to that center bolt. You got to get wrenches that are a half a tooth off. As long as you got wrenches that are a half a tooth off, you can get it out. I just got to keep swapping wrenches back and forth. Yeah, Jake put that oil galley plug in here and it was hitting my distributor, so I took it out and I tapped it as much as I could and then I filed it down a bunch. It should be okay now, I hope. It's alive! It's alive! Okay, bye.